Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about simplifying radicals. Now this is something that should not be new, but we are going to extend it so that way it goes a little bit further than we have. But let's start with something a little bit a simple one, and then we'll kind of work our way from there. So what I want to do is I want to simplify the square root of 216. Now the nice thing about this is very similar to the week 1 video when you were taking out GCFs, but instead of two things that you're taking a number out, you're just going to be focusing on the one. And we are going to use the ladder method. So I'm going to, very similar to that first video, I'm going to put 216 in a ladder. And just like that first video, we are looking for prime factors. And ultimately, I like to work my way from small to big, or whatever kind of comes out and I notice first. Again, remember, prime numbers only multiplied by 1 in itself. So 216 is an even number. And because it is an even number, I know that 2 will come out of it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 2 out of 216, which leaves me with 108. 216 divided by 2, 108. And I'm going to continue this pattern all the way down until I get the number 1. 108 is again even. Dividing it by 2 gives me a 54. And I'm going to keep taking 2's out until I run into a non-even number. So this again is a 2, which leaves me with 27. Now I can no longer take a 2 out, but I move my way up to a 3. I know 3 goes into the 27. And if I divide 27 by 3, that gives me a 9. The smallest number that goes into 9 that I know is also a 3. That gives me a 3. The smallest number that goes into 3 is 3. And that leaves me with a 1. And that's where I'm going to stop. Once I get to that 1, I am done. So ultimately, 216 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. So what we're going to do is we are going to rewrite this, which means I know that 216, or the square root of 216, is the same thing as the square root of 2 times 2 times 2. And instead of writing 2 times 2 times 2, I know that that is 2 cubed. And 3 times 3 times 3, which is 3 cubed. Okay? The reason I do this is so that way we make sure we understand that when I'm looking for square roots, I'm looking for perfect squares, two numbers that multiply together to get me a nice number. Okay? So I'm looking for groups of 2. So if I have 3 2's, that's what 2 cubed means, how many groups of 2 can I make out of 3? Well, I can make 1. If that's the case, 1 2 gets to come out front. Okay, and if I take one group of 2 away from 3 2's, how many are left? Well, there's 1. That goes back underneath the radical. Same thing with 3. There are 3 3's here. How many groups of 2 can I make? 1. I get to bring 1 3 out, multiply those together. How many 3's are left? If I take out a group of 2, 1. So that puts that 3 back in there. And then I simplify. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 3 is 6. So the square root of 216 is 6 square roots of 6. Okay, let's do another one. And as we continue, we're going to add a little bit more difficult ones. So what happens if I add 2 square roots of 45? Okay, what I'm going to do in this problem is I'm going to kind of ignore this 2 here at the beginning. Okay, and I'll come back to it at the end. And I'm just going to ladder the 45 just like I did the 216 over here. So 45 goes in my ladder. Okay, now 45 ends in a 5. I know that that means 5 goes into 45. So even though it might not be the smallest, I'm going to use the ones that make sense to me. So if I take the 5 out, that leaves me with a 9. Okay, well, the smallest number that I know that goes into 9, easy to divide out, is a 3. Leaves me with a 3. And 3 goes to 1. So that means the square root of 45 is the same thing as 5 times 3 times 3, or 45 is 5 times 3 times 3. So I know that 2 square root of, instead of 45, I have 5 times 3 squared. Okay, now I'm going to look at this. Same thing. It's a square root, so I'm looking for pairs. I only have one 5. Can you make a pair from 1? No, so that means no 5's going to come out. It has to stay underneath the radical. Okay, I have 2 3s. How many groups can you make? If you have 2, well, you can make 1. So 1 3 comes out, and because that 2 is already out there to start with, that 3 gets multiplied by the 2. The 5 stays under from before, and because we took out a group of 3s, one group of 3s, that means there are no 3s left, so no 3 goes back underneath. And now I simplify by multiplying my 2 and my 3 to get 6 square roots of 5. Okay, what happens if we do something like this? Again, a little bit same concept, but just a little bit harder here. 5 square roots of 80a squared. Okay, when I get to something like this, again, I'm going to kind of forget the a or the 5 for a while, just like we forgot the 2 and kind of put it on the end here. And I'm also going to kind of leave the a squared and just ladder the 80. Okay, just focus on the 80 right now. So laddering an 80. Yes, 80 does end in 0, so I could take a 5 out, but I know 80 is also even, so I can take a 2. Again, the order in which you factor out does not matter, or simplify. That gives me 40. Another 2 gives me 20. Another 2 gives me 10. Another 2 gives me 5. Okay, now I know that 2 doesn't go into 5, but 5 does. Goes into it once. Okay, and now I get to the 1, so I know that 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 5 is 80. So I can rewrite this problem as 5 times the square root of 1, 2, 3, 4 2's, so 2 to the 4th power, times a 5. And then don't forget that a squared that we've kind of left off at the end. That also is still there. Okay, but I don't need to simplify that out like I did the 80 because a squared is just a squared. So again, square root, we're looking for groups of 2. So if I have 4 things, in this case I have 4 2's, how many groups of 2 can you make? Well, if you have 4, you can make 2 groups of 2. That means I got to bring 2 2's out front. So the 5 is already there. I'm bringing 2 2's out, and no 2's go back underneath the radical. So the 2's are completely out. Okay, there's only one 5. I cannot make a group of 5, or a group of 2 with 5s. So that 5 goes back underneath my radical. I have 2 a's. I can make one group of 2 with 2 a's, which means one a gets to come out front. And if I had 2 things and I made a group of 2, none of them are left over. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify this. Well, there's nothing to simplify in the square root. It's just 5. But I know that 2 squared is 4. So this is 5 times 4 times a. And I know 5 times 4 is 20 times a is 20a, square roots of 5. So that would be my answer. 5 square roots of 80a squared simplifies to 20a times the square root of 5. Okay. Let's do another one like that one. So 7 square root of 96m cubed. Okay, again, the 7 and the m cubed I'm going to kind of leave to the side because those don't need to be simplified. What does is the 96. 96 is an even number, which means I know that 2 goes into it 48 times. 48 is still even, so 2 goes into it 24 times. Again, I'm just dividing, remember. 24 is even, so another 2. There's going to be a lot of 2's on this one. 12 goes 2 to 6. 6 is a 2 and a 3. And then a 3 gets me a 3 and a 1. So again, just dividing the number that I know that goes out into it. So I know that 7 square roots of 96, 7 times the square root of 96m cubed is the same thing as 7 times the square root of 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2's. So 2 to the 5th power times the 3. And then don't forget to come back and get that exponent, so times m cubed. Or that, not that exponent, that variable. Sorry. So again, now we're going to look at what we can take out and what needs to stay under. So I know the 7 is already out front. Okay. And just because this one is a little bit messier, I'm going to go ahead and put my square root to start with. So I have 5 2's. How many groups can you make with 5? Of 2, 2. So I can make 2 groups, 2 pairs And if I make 2 pairs, how many are left? Well, that only takes up 4, so 1 2 is left. So the 3 has no pairs. It's only one of them, so it stays underneath the radical. And then the m cubed, if I have 3, I can make 1 pair and 1 left over. So I multiply out here, so 2 times 2, so 2 squared is 4, so 7 times 4 times m, and square root 6 is 2 times 3, so 6m, and I come out here and multiply this together, and that gives me 28m times the square root of 6.